Hello everyone. Today I'm going to be featuring the Hizen, the tier 9 premium IGN battleship, and I will be comparing this ship heavily with the Izumo and the Amagi. I won't compare it with the Musashi because Musashi isn't really accessible anymore, but I will leave it at the simple fact that if you have Musashi, there is absolutely no reason to get the Hizen. Musashi is absolutely overpowered for tier 9 and continues to be. If you have that thing, there is no point getting the Hizen. The Musashi is a better experience. Now, the ship itself. Let's start with the simple parameters. First of all, the thing that probably sticks out is the concealment. 13.7. This is actually worse than both Amagi and Izumo. Izumo might surprise you, but Izumo concealment has gotten buffed over the years, so Izumo concealment is actually 13.5, which makes Hizen the least stealthy of the bunch. The turning circle is 880, once again, basically Izumo, and rudder shift is 17 seconds, 17.1, which is slightly better than Izumo. The speed is 29.6 with the speed flag, which is a whole 0.2 knots faster than the Izumo. You note that I'll be comparing it a lot because, well, most of you have played the Izumo. So in concealment speed, it's roughly identical, as is the handling. The health, once again, very close, 75.9 versus Izumo's slight advantage of, I think, was it 78.9. Izumo has about 3000 health more. However, what must be highlighted is the differences in armor. Hizen's armor is basically trash. Whereas Izumo has that 57mm deck plating, which helps you mitigate a lot of the incoming damage, the Hizen has 32mm plating across the board. This means overmatching shells, overmatch everything, and of course HE spam is brutally effective against the ship, because, well, there's really no part besides the turret and the citadel armor that can shatter any incoming HE. The bigger issue, however, is the citadel setup. It has a similar setup to the Izumo, which means that it has kind of a turtleback that doesn't really work, just like the Izumo. If you get broadside, Izumo is fairly easy to citadel, but the Hizen is actually even easier. The citadel extends further above the waterline than Izumo's, and I'd say it's a bit steeper. Generally speaking, if you give broadside in the Hizen, and anyone has enough pen to actually punch through it, they will citadel you. This is a bigger issue than with the Izumo, because the Hizen, of course, has 2 of the turrets in the back. It is a 12-gun battleship, which means you're forced to give significantly more broadside, and you're forced to put this citadel at significantly more risk. The lack of deck armor to mitigate HE damage, and being forced to expose this huge citadel in order to actually use all your guns, all means that in terms of tankiness, it loses, and it loses heavily to the Izumo in terms of tankiness. The guns are, of course, the next objective here. It does have 12 guns compared to Izumo's 9 and Amagi's 10, but this comes at a heavy cost. First of all, the dispersion. Whereas Izumo has 2.0 Sigma, making it a very consistent sniper, and Amagi has 1.8, which makes it pretty good at tier 8. Hizen has 1.7, so once again the worst of the bunch. You'd think that 12 guns with 410mm caliber would be enough to overcome this, but they kind of artificially also nerfed the reload significantly. The base reload on the Hizen is 38 seconds. Izumo's base reload is 30. Amagi's is also 30. So you run the reload module on both the Izumo and the Hizen, and it gets the Hizen reload down to 33.4, whereas Izumo sits at 26.4. So effectively a 7-second reload difference. And this is most certainly very noticeable, and this faster reload combined with the better Sigma means that effectively you're landing just as many shells in the Izumo as you are in the Hizen, except of course the penetration values. I'm gonna put up a few charts here where you can see the top two pin charts, or the pin charts for the IGN battleships. You can see that Musashi and Izumo pen is basically identical, really. But then you have the Hizen pen. It's barely better than Amagi's. Obviously, at tier 8, Amagi's pen is decent. At tier 9, it starts to falter. But more important than this is obviously the fact that Izumo has 0.3 better Sigma, 7 seconds better reload, and penetration to match Musashi's pen, while at the same time being a tankier ship. These are really the most important values of a battleship. How well can you tank? How well can you deal damage? And in both of those, the Hizen just loses, objectively loses in basically every single way to the Izumo. It also even loses in concealment, which is somewhat tragic. It doesn't mean it's a bad ship though. I just want to compare this because I do want to highlight the fact that the Izumo is one of probably the better tier 9 tech tree battleships in the game. Like, you could do a lot worse than the Izumo. Izumo is better than Aiva, it's better than Lion. Like, it's better than Friedrich Grosse. Izumo is a very, very good tier 9 tech tree ship. So saying that the Hizen loses to the Izumo isn't the end of the world. But it does, of course, the reason I have to do this comparison is because people might want to spend money on this ship. And basically there is not a whole lot of reason for it unless you really want this Hizen type of ship. The firing angles are actually not that bad when you see the ship pushing in like this, but the fundamental issue really here is that it's kind of this weird hybrid of the Amagi and the Izumo. In an Amagi, you want to try to close the distance so that you can make up for your kind of lack of pen by utilizing your turtleback. You want to brawl enemies. They can't citadel you close range, you can citadel them. That's what makes the Amagi quite unique. Izumo, on the other hand, well, you don't really want to close range. You want to stay at range where you can utilize your deck armor to bounce and shatter HE and use your improved Sigma and pen to punch through ships. Hizen kind of sits in the middle. You struggle to really find an optimal range for this ship. You close in too far, you get absolutely melted under the incoming fire and the overmatch and basically all the issues that this ship struggles with. And if you try to brawl, well, you just get citadeled so very, very easily, and your hugely long reload doesn't really benefit you much in a brawl situation. On the other hand, if you try to snipe, play it like an Izumo, well, then you're struggling with the poorer dispersion and once again, the long reload, so not exactly the best sniper either. I wish I would have been an Izumo there instead. But all of this really leaves you in this situation where Hizen just feels kind of uncomfortable to play. It's not a bad ship. For tier 9 battleship, this is not a bad one. 410mm guns have the advantage of overmatching 27mm plating. You can blap a lot of ships and you can do a lot of damage. And I mean, it's fairly fast and it's got decent parameters. It's not a bad tier 9 battleship. But when it comes to a straight up comparison, I just find it losing to the Izumo significantly. And obviously, if the tech tree ship is beating it, it does bring the question, why would you spend money on it? Because if you do want to brawl in an IGN battleship, the Amagi is right there, waiting for you. I played this ship for a lot. I tried to really make up my mind about it, and ultimately I have such a hard time really recommending it. I don't think it's a bad ship. Once again, I think it's actually, in terms of balance, I think it's a fairly balanced ship. It fits pretty well in with tier 9s. So if there's something about the gameplay that really, really calls to you, there's nothing wrong with getting the ship and even enjoying it. And once again, nothing wrong. You can enjoy ships that aren't the best of the line. They don't always have to be the best of the line. And I played about 15-16 battles in the ship, and I'm averaging about 115k damage, which for a tier 9 battleship isn't bad at all. It shows consistent performance. AA is of course very much IGN tier, which means 5 flak with no accuracy, and the continuous damage is basically a joke. I mentioned it briefly because that's an IGN thing. You shouldn't be if you want to play AA battleships, you shouldn't be in the IGN line to begin with. So this game really highlights that fact that first of all, well, we're forced to back off because they have a lot of very, very scary ships, like for example the Musashi that overmatches all my armor, and also the fact that my team is mostly sitting at A, so I'm trying to kite them towards them and just trying to use these guns as much as possible, deal the maximum amount of damage that I can. But there will be a couple of situations in this game. The reason I chose this game is just to show you how frustrating the poor dispersion with the 1.7 Sigma can be, even if you have 12 guns, because there are plenty of those situations in this match. As for the captain skill rework, Eagle Eye will probably help this ship a lot. Eagle Eye is the new upcoming captain skill that will give you 10% better dispersion if no one is within your concealment range. But once again, if it helps this ship, it's gonna help the Izumo even more. Izumo has better concealment and already naturally better dispersion, so obviously it's gonna be even better. So Hizen will gain some benefits, yes. It will benefit somewhat from this captain skill rework, but there are both the Musashi and Hizen will benefit even more in terms of long-range gameplay, in terms of just sniping battleship gameplay. Trying to punish the Slava as much as I can, but of course as angled Slava is a very, very tanky ship. I tried to Citadel him earlier, but we struggled to punch through. Slava of course has that angled plating. Note that Hizen's broadsides are, well, the amount of freeboard that you show to the enemy is very significant. You can kind of see it here if you look at the side of the ship. You're kind of a huge tub. In fact, you kind of remind me a bit of the Vermont, because there's just so much broadside, so much area to shoot on this thing. Combine that with the concealment, the handling, and the lack of armor. Hizen is a very juicy ship to shoot. Calling target on the Benson, trying to push in, trying to support my DDs as they have contested the cap, and here you're gonna get one of your first examples of what can be quite a frustrating experience. The Edinburgh is caught full broadside. He starts reversing. My first shot, well, thought I shot kinda in the center, but he might have reversed out of the way. The second volley, on the other hand, well, it was basically as on the center as you can be, and we have one bounce. That was 12 guns at an Edinburgh, almost full broadside reversing, and we did a grand total of 1 overpen in damage to him. It's frustrating, because I know for a fact that Izumo would almost guaranteed have deleted him. Izumo would also have been able to shoot sooner. Luckily this guy is sitting there spotted for so long that I get to shoot again. And our next volley is out, and we finally get a Citadel. But the next turret isn't enough to actually kill him, because we only get 2 overpens. The gun power, for supposedly having 12 of these 410mm guns, it doesn't really feel powerful. That's my fundamental issue. The ship doesn't feel powerful when you play it. It's not bad, but I never really got the sense that, I'm the big boss here. I'm the guy who's gonna run in and wreck them. The turret traverse also is it's actually worse than Izumo's, even though you have, well, a much more awkward turret setup, which forces you to turn your back turrets fully around. In fact, once again, it loses to both the Amagi and to the Izumo in turret traverse. It's kind of weird, really. Like, Wargaming have this fear of making these 12 gun battleships too powerful, so they really go ham with making all the stats a bit worse than the tech tree equivalent in order to make up for this. Now, I'm not saying, once again, I don't think the Hizen is actually a bad ship. I'm not saying that. A bad ship is, oh, here we go. Edinburgh pops out, volley is out, and, well, the dispersion was kind of all over the place, but we got the Citadel that we needed. And now I'm just going to try to nose-in rush the Musashi, hopefully doing a drive-by on him. Not very comfortable doing this, honestly, because, well, he overmatches my nose, and the Citadel on the ship is huge, but luckily Musashi has a huge Citadel as well. However, the Alaska pops up, and he's pushing up into both of my DDs. And I know for a fact that Alaska is in a division with the Jutland as well, so this can get really scary really quickly. So I'm going to try to support them. Taking pot shots at an Alaska, giving a lot of broadside at 13.5 kilometers away. 2 overpens, the first volley. Okay, we're still closing distance with the Musashi. The reload takes us a fair bit, but whatever, we're gonna keep our guns on the Alaska. Worst case scenario, we can just ram the Musashi. At this point, I'm just trying to claw a win for my team because there's only 4 minutes 30 remaining and we're still down on points. Looks like I've gotten undetected. I get briefly spotted again, but I think it's too late. I aim for the front citadel, but then I change my mind because he's so angled, and I instead shoot the superstructure, getting a really good volley in. Once again, there's a lot of damage in these guns, provided you get the hits. And getting the hits, well, that's really the challenge, isn't it? Because this is where it starts getting a bit depressing. Alaska almost, well, basically slows down broadside to me at 12 kilometers. The first volley, we get 1 pen. We got another 3 turrets ready. He's almost stationary. I aim very high on the broadside as well to make sure that I get maximum amount of pens and maximum amount of damage. And it's nice, it's okay, but it doesn't feel really scary, does it? He accelerates, we shoot him again. I'm just trying to citadel him. I've been trying to citadel him most of this game, but we really can't. We got really good dispersion on one turret, and now he's just gonna back off. There are these situations where I feel if I was playing the Izumo, I'd be killing all of these ships. It wouldn't even be a question, it wouldn't be a doubt that maybe perhaps I can pick up this kill. It would just be a guaranteed kill. To be fair, I will warn you that I am biased. I mean, okay, Hizen, I said my average damage in the Hizen is about 115,000. My average damage in the Izumo is 139,000. Like, that's a pretty big percentage lead. And that's the sniping style. Even the Amagi, that's a tier lower and is the brawling style, has higher damage at 117,000 than my Hizen. I think it's just that I am biased, or I don't like ships that don't really have a role that they're anything good at, because I don't really find anything that the Hizen is particularly good at. It's not really a sniper, it's not really a brawler, it's not particularly good mid-range either, it's not really an AA ship, it's not really stealthy, it's kind of less than average at basically everything, but it has a hard-hitting broadside. And while it looks good on paper and it sounds good on paper, as a gameplay experience, we do manage to cap C. My Ognaboy smartly went up there to contest it after we got the kill, but the Jutland has gone down and capped A. So what I'm trying to do here now is help my Montana pincer off this Alaska. I've loaded HE already. Normally I wouldn't really be too worried about having AP loaded and then expert loading HE, but you got to remember the reload is absurdly long at 33 seconds, so once again that also diminishes the use of expert loader. I'd rather have HE loaded. If I spot the Jutland I might kill him. If I spot the Alaska I should hopefully at least do some damage. That's the idea that I'm working with here. I saved the heal for as long as I could, but now that there's a risk that I might be blepped, I finally pop the heal. Coming around the corner, trying to catch vision of this Alaska, and this is where the volley gets honestly rather amusing. Keep in mind that I'm actually clearing the island with my front guns, but somehow even when I aimed there, 2 of the shells from my front guns curved to the left and actually clipped the island. You can go back and watch that on YouTube in slow motion if you want, but of the 6 guns that my front turret shot, 2 somehow, thanks to that incredibly poor dispersion, managed to curve into the left and hit the island. Somehow, sometimes, the dispersion is almost tragically bad. Jutland pops up, they still have a chance to win, they still have a points lead, so I have to push in, I have to secure this kill. I'd go for the blind fire and actually land 3 shells. I throw extra blind fire in there because there's 20 seconds and I'm afraid he might just sit in the smoke or even just reverse in it. Keep pushing in, he does get spotted, and at this range even the Hizen secondaries, I didn't really talk about them, they're not much to talk about, manage to secure the kill, and we do actually manage to turn this, well, for a change, close game into a win. 189,000 damage, Confederate, close quarters expert, and Dreadnought, 5 citadels. Not a bad result for a battleship, for a tier 9 battleship. Not exactly something special, but I mean, not a bad result. And team score wise, 2.3k, that's a perfectly nice result, especially since they didn't have that 3-man division with Alaska Musashi Jutland, which is very powerful, and this was tier 10 matchmaking. Luckily no carrier, of course, though. That can be, I would probably say it's probably worse for the Hizen than anything, because you can't really utilize the additional spotting for any sort of effective sniping, because your dispersion is so all over the place. Detailed report wise, 94,000 tanked, 1.2 million potential, not exactly that special. We did get 52,000 spotting, which is somewhat amusing. A very long game, and I like this game because it showed that it didn't just highlight those devastating strike volleys, but it showed all these volleys where I'm basically shooting broadside targets and I'm struggling to get any hits because the guns are so very inconsistent. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Right, let me actually start by showing the armor. This is what I mentioned about the Citadel. This is how high above the water the Citadel sticks, and it also gives a pretty flat broadside, and the deck armor of the Citadel is actually overmatchable, something that Izumo's Citadel deck armor is in fact not. So another weakness. Note that Izumo also has more of an angle and slightly more plating here. I'd say the Izumo is probably just as vulnerable under the smokestack, but overall the main difference is, of course, once again, the deck armor on the Hizen is 32, upper belt is 32, whereas Izumo sits at a rather comfortable 57 millimeters of plating. Hizen though, build-wise, I do build turret survival. I've had them knocked out temporarily quite often. Additional tankiness, better dispersion, once again even more tankiness, 32 millimeters of plating makes you a very appealing target. Concealment and faster reload to get that very painful reload down to at least 33.4 seconds. Spotter plane so you can shoot smoked up ships. Oh, you know what I actually even forgot to mention? I can't believe I forgot to mention it during the commentary. Another reason why the Hizen is so much squishier. They actually took away a heal. Whereas the Izumo and the Amagi, well, most battleships have 5 heals running Superintendent. The Hizen actually only has 4 heals, even with Superintendent. So I actually forgot that. Another reason why the ship is it's just inferior. It's really this, I don't know what other word to use for it except inferior than the Tech Tree ships. Captain build wise, standard battleship build, priority, AR, Superintendent, fire prevention, concealment, expert marksman, expert loader, and jack of all trades. Very, very standard. I think the Hizen is it's fairly pretty looking ship. I don't really rate, I did mention that it has a lot of freeboard, but it's really when you compare it to something like an Amagi, you get somewhat of an idea of just how much freeboard you're showing. Even the Izumo has probably about the same, maybe? Izumo is probably about the same, except this one is just one big flat board to target. Overall, I played the Hizen, I think, a lot. I'd say I played, let's see, where's Hizen? I played Hizen, oh, that's Georgia, Hizen, here we go. 16 battles, yeah. 69% win rate, once again, pretty good. 115,000 damage, it's not a bad result. But when it comes to dealing damage, I mean, the win rate with 16 battles is of course not much to quote. But then when you compare it to something like Izumo, it's just, the damage is so different. It's, Hizen isn't bad, but when Izumo exists, it is hard to justify. As Amagi, well, that ship is kind of a struggle these days. I do play it a lot because I like the turtleback brawling kind of playstyle with it, but these days, of course, being up tiered into tier 10 isn't exactly a fun experience in the Amagi. Overall, though, I don't want to say the ship is terrible. I don't want to say it like a really some sort of terrible investment. You can absolutely have good games. You can have fun in it. It does pack a heavy broadside, but if you're strapped for cash, there's really no reason to get this ship. If you own the Musashi, there's really no reason to get this ship. It is, well, it's niche. It's a fairly pretty looking ship, but that's pretty much it. Anyways, I'm just gonna keep rambling now, so thank you guys for watching. Thank you for tuning in. As always, if you feel like dropping a sub, I do appreciate it. I am working on my top 10 recommended premiums list, so I have been I've been playing a lot of those ships and not really making a lot of videos, so I apologize for that, but people always expect one in January, so I'm trying to get it done. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great one.